What's up guys, it's Topsy and welcome back to the channel. So let's continue on with our journey of breaking down every Speed Duel set, and today we are going to be covering my personal favorite Speed Duel box in Duelists of Shadows. And I'm super excited to talk about this set just because I think it has a lot of interesting decks, and I wanted to go ahead and break them down for anyone that wants to go ahead and try out any of the decks from that set. Alright then, so a few general things before we do begin. First thing I want to go and clear up is that the point of this series is to go ahead and explain the purpose of each individual card in each character deck, whether it be for an important combo and or whether or not they're just a card that it's supposed to just be there for its own individual purpose. Additionally, I want to go and explain what the general idea of what the deck is trying to accomplish via the skill and the composition of the deck. Finally, we're going to go ahead and do a few test hands. With all that being said, if you guys do end up enjoying today's video and would like to support the channel and or have any friends that you'd like to teach how to play speed duels, then feel free to like, subscribe, and share this video. Alright, with all that being said, thank you so much and let's begin. Alright then, so first character up in Duelists of Shadows is none other than the Supreme King Jaden. And Jaden has a very interesting deck just because we are once again revisiting elemental heroes, but this time around we are introducing something different, that being the evil heroes as well, which makes this deck kind of, well, not that good, but it does have some aspects that are better than the original elemental hero strategies from Duel Academy and Midterm Paradox. But nevertheless, because we're still dealing with the elemental heroes and the skills aren't crazy good, the deck does suffer quite a bit. Alright, so before we go ahead and begin with breaking down the deck and all that, let's go ahead and talk about both skills. The main skill of this deck is Ruthless Means, which is a mediocre skill that doesn't really elevate the deck whatsoever. This skill, all it really does is that while you control an evil hero monster, you're able to discard a card to make a monster your opponent controls lose attack and defense equal to its original attack and defense. And essentially what this does is that it allows you to pretty much out any monster your opponent may have, which is pretty cool, and it's an okay effect. The main issues that I have with this skill is that summoning out your fusions isn't that easy, and primarily when you activate the skill you want to have a fusion on field, and your main deck evil hero monsters aren't that great either. So for the most part, Ruthless Means isn't going to be doing all that much for you if you're playing the deck in its pre-constructed form. As for the second skill, I quite like this skill a lot more with Dark Unity. Essentially what this skill does is that it does two separate things. It can turn any monster your opponent controls into a rock monster, making it as to where you're able to use super polymerization to summon out your dark evil hero Gaia, which is one of the boss monsters of this deck, and I like that a lot. The fact that it allows you to make a very specific monster a lot easier. But additionally, not only does it do that, but it also goes ahead and adds you a copy of Dark Fusion from your deck to your hand, which is all really awesome. So it has quite a bit of utility in this deck. For that very reason, I think Dark Unity is probably the skill you want to go with more often than not whenever you're playing Supreme King Jaden's deck in this pre-constructed form. Now that we have an idea of both the skills and what exactly they do, let's go ahead and talk about the deck. And the deck gets divided into a few sections. First off, we have the elemental hero monsters with Sparkman, Clayman, Percinatrix, Avion, and Wildheart. The main reason we have these cards in particular is because all of them have a dedicated fusion monster in the extra deck with Inferno Wing, Lightning Golem, and Wild Cyclone. After that, we have the evil hero monsters, and to be honest, I don't particularly like many of them. Evil hero Malicious Edge is pretty cool as a tribute monster just because it's fairly big and it does piercing damage, which is always nice. But like Infernal Prodigy is okay. You can facilitate the summon of like Dark Ruler Hades with that. I guess that's pretty cool. And Infernal Gainer it's meh. And the main reason I say it's meh is just because like the effect isn't bad. Being able to like banish itself to make a monster you control attack twice is pretty okay, especially if you use this on your fusions. But the thing is, you already have to have like a monster established to do that, and that it has to be a fiend monster. Sorry, that didn't specify. So the main targets for this are going to be cards like Evil Hero Malicious Edge, which you still have to establish, Hades, or your fusions, which again, like it's a cool effect, but it just doesn't do anything for the deck. Continuing on, we have Versago the Destroyer. I quite like this card just because it does make summoning out your fusions quite easier, so that's nice. So this card is going to be a godsend in most of your hand. Dark Ruler Hades, it's only here because you need another high level fiend monster in order to make Malicious Fiend. And finally, we have Absorbing Jar and Sand Moth as rock targets of your very own in order to make Dark Gaia. So that's the reason why we have these cards. Continuing on to the spells now, we have Dark Calling, Dark Fusion, and Super Polymerization as the dedicated fusion cards of the deck. Dark Calling works as Miracle Fusion in this deck, and what that means is that you can use your monsters in your graveyard and field as materials for a fusion summon of a Dark Fusion monster, a monster that can be summoned with Dark Fusion, that being your evil heroes. While Dark Fusion works as polymerization fusion cards from your hand in or field, but the great thing about this card is that your monster becomes untargetable that turn, which is really important when you take into consideration a lot of the great cards in the format, like Saku, Book of Moon. Cards like those cannot deal with your summoned fusion monster with this effect. So that's why these two cards are pretty good. And finally, we already talked about, but Super Polymerization. Under most circumstances, you're never going to be able to activate this card just because the fusion materials for a lot of these monsters are very specific. But under these circumstances that you can activate the effect of your skill, you are able to summon out something like Dark Gaia fairly easily. As for the other ones with Evil Mind, this card isn't particularly great just because it relies on your opponent's graveyard, but it does have some neat effects. So essentially, what the way this works is that if you control a fiend monster, you're able to activate effects based on the amount of cards your opponent has in their graveyard. If they have 1, you can draw a card, which is nice. If they had 4 more, you can add a hero from your deck to your hand, or a Dark Fusion, which is pretty cool. If they had 10, you can add a Poly card or a card that fusion summons from your deck to your hand. So essentially, like, it's most of the times if you activate this card, it's probably going to be a Upstart Goblin of sorts, which just draws you 1 card. Finally, for the spells, we have Dark Roll Lightning. This is your dedicated way of removing back row, as of say, being able to set up the graveyard and popping any set card your opponent may have. The great thing about this card is it can destroy set monsters and or set back row. So that's pretty awesome. Now for the trap cards, we have Hero Signal in order to get access to any hero monster, element hero monster you need. Dark Deal is kind of weird in this deck, just because while you can negate a normal spell your opponent may activate, you don't benefit all that much from discarding, just because, well, the great thing about discarding is that you can activate Dark Calling, but for the most part, like, you're losing hand advantage for negating a very specific card. It's a weird card. I feel like it would have benefited more if the fiends you had in deck were maybe like Dark Worlds, but in this situation, I think the card's too situational to be any good. And finally, we have Windstorm of Etaqua. This card is just generically good, and it helps you with problematic board states where your opponent may have a big monster that are trying to destroy your card you need on field, and or you can activate this when you have an opponent's monster you want to get rid of, but their attack is too high and maybe their defense is a bit more manageable. So that's why we have this here. As a whole, the deck construction is okay. It's not the best deck to come out of Duelists of Shadows, but it's a okay deck, all things considered. All right, now let's try out some test hands. Okay, so here we have our hand, and this is an interesting one, I'm not gonna lie. So let's go to begin by setting our Wild Heart to the top of the deck. And so what I'm thinking here is we could easily fusion summon in this situation just because we have the Versago, the Destroyer, in our hand. But what I'm more considering here instead is, because we do have the Hero Signal and the Avian on the field, I'm considering just doing something with that instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and begin by setting our Avian, and we're going to also set our Hero Signal. And we're just going to pass turn on that. So we pass turn, it's our opponent's turn, they probably summon out a monster, and they destroy the Avian, right? Because Avian isn't that strong, so it's very likely to happen. So Avian goes to the graveyard, we then activate our Hero Signal, and then we get to special summon whatever hero monster we want. And this is going to be very dependent on as to what exactly you want to go ahead and do this turn. I think, in my personal opinion, the best monster to summon out in this situation would probably be something like a Clayman. And the reason I say this is because with Clayman on the field, you can then fusion summon into the Lightning Golem. You could do the same thing with the Sparkman as well, but Clayman is much bigger, so even if your opponent had a second monster on the field, you have a higher likelihood of keeping it around for the fusion summon. But even if you didn't care about the fusion summon, summoning out the Clayman to the field also does ensure that you have a higher likelihood of being able to tribute summon for the Dark Ruler Hades if that's the route you want to take instead. So a lot of different options. So we're gonna go and do that. We're gonna summon out the Clayman. All right, now it's our turn. We get to draw, and that's a pretty good draw. Okay, so what we're gonna do here now is that we're gonna go ahead and activate our skill. All right, so with the skill on the field, now we can go ahead and activate it if we wanted to. And you can take a few routes here. So there is quite a few things you can summon out with the effect of Dark Unity. The first one is you could realistically make Evil Hero Malicious Fiend if you think you can do a lot of damage that turn. And that might actually be the play to make here. So I think that's what I'm gonna end up doing. So we're gonna go ahead and activate the effect of Dark Unity, we're going to go ahead and discard our Windstorm of Etiquette to the graveyard, which really sucks, but it's okay. We're going to be potentially winning this turn, and we're going to be adding a copy of Dark Fusion to our hand. Now with Dark Fusion in our hand, we get to activate it. We get to send both the Dark Ruler Hadaz and the Versago the Destroyer to the graveyard. And with that, we're going to get to Fusion Summon into the Evil Hero Malicious Fiend. And with the effect of Dark Fusion, our Fiend is untargetable. And also, this card is going to be dealing a ton of damage. And realistically, with this board, you can potentially win the duel. All right, let's try another hand. That's an interesting hand. Okay. So let's go ahead and begin by putting the Super Poly to the top of the deck. And let's go ahead and set our Avion. We're going to go ahead and set our Hero Signal. And we're going to pass turn on that. Just because we do have the Dark Calling, this does mean that we're going to get to Fusion Summon whatever we want on the following turn. So we end turn. Our opponent goes ahead and outs the Avion. We activate our Hero Signal. And then we get to bring out whatever hero monster we want. I think in this situation, the best option here would be the Wild Cyclone, just because of the fact that when he attacks, he pretty much nullifies any back row your opponent may have. So we're going to go ahead and go for the Wild Heart. We'll make the assumption that they set a bunch of back row. All right, and with that, we summon out the Wild Heart. And even if our opponent outs it, we'll still be able to fusion something using the Dark Calling. So it's our turn, we get to draw. And it's kind of a poopy one, I'm not gonna lie. Let's go ahead and banish these guys. And we'll go ahead and summon out the Wild Cyclone. And yeah, that's what you would bring out. If you wanted to, you could always summon out in defense mode too. But I'd probably just go with attack mode and deal with all your opponent's back row. But yeah, that's just some ideas as to how exactly I would play the Dark Jaden deck. Hope that helps. Okay, so now we're on to Nightshroud, which has a really cool deck. However, I do prefer Camula's version better, which have a similar gimmick going on. So, Nightshroud's strategy is essentially a Red Eyes deck that tries to make Red Eyes Darkness Dragon as fast as possible via its skill. Which, speaking of, let's talk about that. So, this skill is Forged in Steel, and this skill is pretty damn great. A lot of it is just awesome. So essentially what this skill does is that essentially once per duel, you're able to either target a Red Eyes monster or a vanilla dragon you control and make its name become Red Eyes Black Dragon on field. What this does, it essentially makes it to where you're able to special summon Red Eyes Darkness Dragon from your hand with almost any monster in the deck. And that's pretty fantastic. Additionally, that's not where it ends. If you control the Red Eyes Darkness Dragon on your field, it gains the following effect. It essentially gives it the effect of Red Eyes Metal Darkness Dragon, which allows it to special summon a dragon from the graveyard every single turn. And that's incredible value. That makes Red Eyes Darkness Dragon an actual fierce boss monster on the deck, just because you, in addition to being able to revive dragons, it also gains attack for dragons in the graveyard. And as a whole, it's really, really good. As for the second skill, this one pales in comparison to the first because it's a very niche attack gain for a vanilla dragon you control. Essentially what you do is that if you control a vanilla dragon, meaning a non-effect dragon monster like Red Eyes Black Dragon, you're able to banish another vanilla in your graveyard and make that monster you control gain attack times the level of that monster times, what was it, 200. And at that you get piercing damage, which is cool, but I feel like with only 3 vanillas in the deck, it's gonna be very situational and you always want to go with Forged Steel. But that's just my thoughts. Alright, then now that we understand both skills, let's move on to the deck. Starting off with the Red Eyes lineup, we have Red Eyes Darkness Dragon, the boss monster of the deck, Red Eyes Black Dragon, the monster you typically want to, well, not typically, but the one that you're supposed to want to tribute off to summon out Red Eyes Darkness Dragon, Red Eyes Black Trick, not that good, but it's supposed to help you summon out Red Eyes Black Dragon specifically. Black Metal Dragon, this card is incredible and is one of the best cards in the deck because of the fact that when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you're able to add a Red Eyes card from your deck to your hand, meaning that you can search out your Red Eyes Darkness Dragon, making this deck a bit more consistent. After that, we have Red Eyes Wyvern. Wyvern isn't bad. It has a really interesting effect in the graveyard, but the best thing about this card is the fact that it's an 1800 attack monster, which is pretty good, and it has Red Eyes in the name, so if you summon this card, activate the skill, you can summon out Red Eyes Darkness Dragon fairly easily. Alright, moving on to the vanillas, we have Luster Dragon and Luster Dragon number 2. Not much to say about these. And then we just have like miscellaneous good stuff of dragons. We have Mirage Dragon, which can attack without having to worry about trap cards. Spear Dragon, which is just a large dragon that can do piercing damage. We have the Totem Dragon, which works as a double tribute for not vanilla dragons, but any dragon monster, making Red Eyes Black Dragon a bit easier to summon without cheating it out. The best thing about Totem Dragon is the fact that it does have a really cool graveyard effect where you are able to bring it back, but it is fairly convoluted in the fact that you have to control no cards on your field and only dragons in your graveyard, which won't be an issue in order to resolve it. But as a whole, it's not a bad card. We have Troop Dragon, which whenever this card is dealt with, you can get another body on field. It kind of just helps you survive turns. And finally, we have Vanguard, which is a really cool card, just for the very fact that it can get big as hell, and it has a really interesting effect in the graveyard where if it's sent to the graveyard via an opponent's card effect, you are able to special summon a dragon vanilla from the graveyard, that being your Red Eyes Black Dragon and or like I guess Luster Dragons. As a whole, the dragon lineup isn't bad at all. There's some cards that I would have probably switched out for, but as a whole, decent lineup. Moving on to the spell cards, first one up is Cosmic Cyclone, arguably one of the best forms of back removal next to MST. Dragon's Gunfire is a really interesting tech in the deck, just for the very fact that that 800 burn can come up at certain times and can win you duels out of nowhere. But the best thing about this is the fact that you can at times destroy monsters you didn't think you could out with this effect, so it's not a bad card whatsoever. After that, we have Stamping Destruction, another great form of back removal, especially for a dragon based strategy. And finally, Swing of Memory. It works as Monster Reborn for a vanilla dragon, which makes it to where at times you are able to just summon out your Red Eyes Black Dragon from the graveyard to summon out the Red Eyes Darkness Dragon from your hand, which is pretty great. Finally, we have the trap cards with Dragon's Rage. It's just to deal damage to your opponent, making all your dragons deal piercing damage. Negate Attack, allowing you to keep around any dragon you need on your field. And finally, Red Eyes Spirit to revive your Red Eyes Black Dragon and or like Wyvern. One important thing you should keep in mind is that cards like Red Eyes Darkness Dragon cannot be special summoned from the graveyard. The only way you can summon this card out is by summoning out via its own summoning condition, and if it gets dealt with, it's just been dealt with. You cannot bring it back whatsoever. So it's something super important to keep in mind regarding this card. Let's now move on to the test hands. Alright then, so here we have Nightshroud with his Red Eye strategy, and this hand isn't half bad actually. So let's go and begin by activating our skill, Forge Steel. And what we're going to begin by doing is we're going to put this at the top of the deck, and honestly, if you wanted to, you could summon out Red Eyes Darkness Dragon turn 1, but we're not going to do that actually. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to begin by setting our Troop Dragon, and there is a good reason for this. So we're going to end our turn, and what this does is that if our opponent summons out one monster, well, we ensure the fact that we're going to have at least another monster on the field if we need it. But if our opponent swarms the field and summons out like 2 or 3 monsters, well, summoning out the Troop Dragon pretty much ensures that we're going to be taking the least amount of damage possible. So let's say they summon out 2 monsters. This is more ideal for us, but play along. So they destroy the Troop Dragon, and then we get to special summon another copy of Troop Dragon from the deck. So let's say they go ahead and out the second Troop Dragon as well. So it goes to the graveyard, and they end their turn. We get to draw for turn, and another important thing about sending Troop Dragon to the graveyard is the fact that it thins out the deck for important cards like Black Metal Dragon. Next up, what we're going to do is that we're going to begin by normal summoning out the Red Eyes Wyvern, and we're going to use the effect of Forge Steel to change his name to Red Eyes Black Dragon, allowing us to tribute it away in order to special summon the Red Eyes Darkness Dragon. And doing this then allows us to activate the effect of Red Eyes Darkness Dragon, the special effect, to go ahead and special summon a dragon monster from our graveyard, being the Red Eyes Wyvern. And with that, we pretty much end on 2 monsters on the field that are a decent stat line. And additionally, we do have the Black Metal Dragon in our hand to go ahead and equip it to the Red Eyes Darkness Dragon. There you go. So it's equipped it to the Red Eyes Darkness Dragon, boosting it up by an additional 600 attack points. And yeah, this is actually one of the better hands you could have seen for this deck, but let's go and try out another one, see if we can get a less optimal one. This hand's actually not bad whatsoever either. Let's go ahead and try another one. Okay, so this is an interesting hand. Let's go and begin by putting the Luster Dragon to the top of the deck, and we'll bring out our skill. This turn, what I'm thinking of doing right now is just setting Black Metal Dragon. So by setting the Black Metal Dragon, you can go ahead and pretty much ensure having a dragon in the graveyard for later on for the Darkness Dragon. But additionally, what this also does is that it goes ahead and adds you a red ice card when it leaves the field. So that's exactly what we're hoping on. So it's our opponent's turn now, they destroy it and goes to the graveyard, and then we get to search out a card. Now, you might be tempted to search out something like the Red Ice Spirit or maybe even the Red Ice Wyvern, but what I'm going to be doing here is we're going to be searching out the Red Ice Darkness Dragon just because we do have quite a few ways of bringing this card out with the amount of monsters in this deck. And the hardest part of this strategy is just getting those monsters on the field, just getting access to this card. So we're going to be adding this to our hand. All right, it's our turn now, and our opponent passes it on. We draw, and you know what? This actually isn't a bad situation whatsoever. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go ahead and normal summon out the Vanguard Dragon. This is actually kind of crazy. We're gonna activate the effect of the Vanguard Dragon, and we're gonna go ahead and send the Red Ice Black Dragon from our hand to the graveyard. And now what we're gonna do is gonna be activate these Sword Memories, bringing back Red Ice Black Dragon from the graveyard. And we don't have to worry about the effect of it being destroyed during the end phase because we're going to be trimming it away immediately for the Red Ice Darkness Dragon without ever needing to use the first effect of the skill to change the name of a monster on the field. Then we get to activate the effect of Darkness Dragon, reviving Red Ice Black Dragon from the graveyard, and look at that, we probably have game right here. The Red Ice Darkness Dragon goes up to 2700. And additionally, we also do have a Stampede Destruction in our hand to go ahead and deal with one piece of back row in our opponent's house and just burn for an additional 500 life points. This hand was crazy. All right, that's pretty much the Nightshroud deck. I told you guys, it's a pretty good deck. All right, now we're on to my personal favorite deck to come out of Duelists of Shadows with Camula's Vampires. And this deck is just so much fun to play, and there's just so much crazy stuff in here. All right, so essentially, as I mentioned, this is in my opinion, the better version of what the Nightshroud deck was trying to accomplish. We have the same game plan here where we're trying to bring out our big boss monster in Vampire Genesis, which is another card that can be special summoned via tributing a specific monster, this time around Vampire Lord. And this deck is just really, really fun to pilot. Alright, as for the skill for this deck, as I mentioned, it is very similar to the Nightshroud deck where you're trying to special summon the Vampire Genesis as fast as possible. This time around, you're able to do this with any card that has the name Vampire in its text. And that's really great because so many of the cards in the deck have Vampire in this text. Not only that, but the great thing about this is that the deck has so many great ways of searching out everything you need. It's just, it feels almost unfair. Once you do that, you can change any Vampire monster you control into the name Vampire Lord. And then if you control Vampire Genesis, you get the additional effect of if it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you're able to target a card in your opponent's graveyard and set it to your field. This means a monster, spell, and or trap, which is absolutely insane. Being able to recover any resource from your opponent's graveyard is always fantastic. But just like Red Ice Darkness Dragon, Vampire Genesis cannot be recovered from the graveyard, at least not special summoned from the graveyard. Super important to know. Alright then, as for the second skill in Delicious Morsel, it's not a bad skill, but it just pales in comparison when you take into consideration Royal Aristocracy, just for the very fact that this skill is pretty decent. If you deal damage with a vampire monster, you're able to gain life points equal to half the damage all your vampires did to your opponent. So if you dealt, let's say, 2,000 points of damage, you gain 1,000 life points during the end phase, which is not bad whatsoever. But again, most of the time if you're playing this deck, you want to play with Vampire Aristocracy. Alright then, now let's talk about the cards in the deck. And let's begin with the vampire stuff. So we have Genesis, it's just a large monster and this is the boss card of the deck. And realistically, I don't really like the main effect this card has, but it's not going to come up. The main effect you want to use is the effect of Vampire Aristocracy. After that, we have the two other pseudo boss monsters of the deck with Vampire Lord and Vampire's Curse. These two cards are incredible and both have revival effects. Curse, if he just gets destroyed by battle, he gets to revive himself in the graveyard and get 500 attack points stronger, while Vampire Lord, if he gets destroyed by card effect, he gets to revive himself also. The pairing of these two cards is really annoying to deal with and they are just so good on field. After that, we have the consistency pieces of the deck with Familiar, Retainer, and Sorceress. All these cards are incredible. Familiar, when it's special summoned to the field, gets to search out a vampire monster. When Retainer gets special summoned to the field, gets to search out a vampire spell card. and when Vampire Sorceress gets destroyed, get to search out a vampire card. The fact that all 3 of these cards exist in the same deck is absolutely insane, and you want to see these cards as often as possible. But you may be asking yourself, but Topsy, how are you supposed to special summon the Retainer and or Familiar? Well, that's the interesting thing about that. Familiar and Retainer both have effects in the graveyard where they're able to special summon themselves from the graveyard by sending a vampire card from your hand and or field to the graveyard, and that pretty much procs the effects of them to search out a card, which is pretty fantastic. One thing to keep in mind is that if these cards are special summoned via this effect, they do get destroyed, they get banished after leaving the field, so super important to know that. After that, we just have some more vampire names with Vampire Lady. She is just a nerfed version of Vampire Lord, which can send a card from your opponent's deck to the graveyard. Vampire Baby, it's not great, it's pretty underwhelming actually, just because it's so weak. The effect isn't bad, it's just the card's really weak, so the main reason you want this card in the deck is just because it has the vampire name in its text. After that, we just have some generic zombie stuff with Plague Wolf. This card is underwhelming also. It can get pretty big, but it dies afterwards. Heavy Knight of Flames, it's just a big vanilla monster because it's a Gemini, so when you summon it, it's not gonna have any effect, but it does have a good Gemini effect where it can destroy any monster that's special summoned, so that's kind of cool. After that, we have Goblin Zombie. I love this card, it's pretty great in this deck just because it can search out a lot of important cards like the Familiar, the Retainer, and you can even search out Curse also, so that's not bad whatsoever. After that, we have Zombina. This card's incredible because when she gets destroyed, she can special summon any level 4 lower card in the graveyard, not just a zombie, anything. So this kind of recursion is really great. And finally, we have Ryokoki. This card is situationally really good. Not only is it a big monster you can tribute summon, but it has a really interesting effect where it can destroy any warrior and or spellcaster monster it battles. So that's pretty cool. As a whole, the monster lineup is pretty fantastic, and there's only just a few cards that I would change if I could change them. Moving on to the spell lineup, we have Book of Life. This card is absolutely insane in this deck, being able to revive any zombie monster in your graveyard and getting rid of a resource in your opponent's graveyard. Incredible. Call of the Mummy, allowing you to cheat out cards like Vampire's Curse, Lord, and or Koki. Incredible. Foolish Burial, really good card as well because you can set up the graveyard with Familiar or Retainer to special summon them and get their effects really quickly. And or you could also send a card like Lord, Curse, or Koki to the graveyard to then revive them with a card like Book of Life if you really wanted to. We have Soul Exchange, which is absolutely insane, the fact that you can tribute summon these cards using your opponent's monsters. We then have, you know what, let's save this. Then we have the Forceful Checkpoint, a really good trap card that I like a lot that prevents your opponent from destroying a card monster you have if they happen to have a monster in their own hand. So this card's really good. Also, it just reduces your opponent's resources. And then we have the 2 cards that actually blow my mind actually exist in this deck with Vampire Desire and Awakening. First, Awakening. This card, pretty much what it does, it just special summons a vampire from your deck, and that's it. It does destroy during the end phase, but just the fact that you can special summon a vampire from the deck is insane, just because what you can do most of the time is when your opponent attacks, you can activate this card, special summon something like a Familiar and or Retainer, and get the search effect because you're special summoning them. Or if you wanted to, you can also activate the effect of Awakening to bring out maybe Curse or Lord, but you don't benefit as much from that just because the card is going to leave after the activation of this, but you can get it out of the deck a lot easier if you really wanted to. But the most insane card in the deck is Vampire Desire. Okay, so the way this card works is that it's both a Foolish Burial and a Monster Reborn at the same time. So it has 2 separate effects that you can activate when you use this card. Either A, you can target a monster you control and send a vampire monster from your deck with a different level, which let's say you control, I don't know, maybe like Vampire Lady. You target her and then you can send either Familiar or Retainer to the graveyard, which is pretty good because you like these cards in the grave. Or you can go ahead and target a vampire monster in your graveyard and then one monster you control, and then special summon the monster in the graveyard by tributing the monster in the field. So with this effect, it makes summoning cards like Curse or Lord a lot easier. It makes proccing the effects of Familiar and or Retainer a lot easier as well. This card has so much utility and it's one of the best cards in the deck, and I absolutely love it. As a whole, as you can see from the amount of glazing I'm doing, I think this deck is absolutely insane, and in my opinion, the best deck out of Duelists of Shadows set. Love this deck. Let's get into some test hands now. Okay then, so let's say this is your opening hand with the Vampire deck, and you know what? This is actually a really good hand. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and begin by summoning out our Vampire Sorceress in defense mode. And after that, we're also going to be pairing it up with a copy of Vampire's Awakening as well. And we're going to pass it on to our opponent. Now, once we pass it on to our opponent, they're probably going to be able to out the Vampire Sorceress. It's not unrealistic to say that just because it does have a decent stat line, but there is plenty of normal summons in the game, at least in the pre-constructed decks, that are able to out this. But even if they don't, that's still okay. Let's say they declare an attack, we can activate the Vampire's Awakening and then bring out either the Retainer or the Familiar. And what I'm thinking here is I'm going to go ahead and summon out the Familiar. The reason for that is because we summon out the Familiar, we're going to get access to our Genesis on the following turn. So we'll pay the cost of Familiar, and then we're going to get to search out the Genesis to our hand because it was special summoned. And our opponent has the option of still attacking into it. It doesn't matter because it's going to get destroyed regardless of the effect of Awakening, or they can decide to target the mystery set monster. And if they do that, they get to destroy the Sorcerer. And what Sorcerer does is it's gonna get searches out a vampire card, which is insane. That can be Desire, that can be Retainer, hell, if we wanted Lord, we could get that. But because of the way I'm looking at the hand right now, what I'm thinking of doing here instead is we're gonna go ahead and just search out Lord. All right, and off that interaction alone, we got this much advantage, which is absolutely insane. So their opponent ends our turn and we leave the field empty. All right, we get to draw for turn now, and wow, what a crazy card we got actually. Okay, so what we're gonna do here now is we're gonna go ahead and activate Call of the Mummy, and with that we get to special summon out the Vampire Lord, which is huge. But that's not where it ends. Additionally, we're also going to go ahead and summon out the Vampire Baby. All right, now with the Vampire Baby on the field, we're gonna go ahead and activate our skill, and with that we're gonna go ahead and change the name of Vampire Baby to Vampire Lord, and we're gonna go ahead and banish it to special summon out the Genesis. And with this, we have quite an insane board right here. We still haven't activated our Book of Life or Foolish Burial, but if you wanted to, you could activate the effect of Foolish Burial to go ahead and send a copy of Retainer. Would be cool, but you don't really need it in this situation anymore. But instead, what I would consider doing is sending a copy of Curse to the graveyard or the Koki. So let's go ahead and say Curse. Because doing this, then that means that we get access to Book of Life on the crackback to go ahead and pretty much bring out another big monster for our opponent to deal with. And yeah, with that, we're dealing a shit ton of damage and we're gonna be doing pretty well for ourselves. Let's try one more hand. Okay, so this hand is not bad actually. So we're gonna go and put this at the top of the deck, and we're gonna go and begin by activating our Foolish Burial. With the Foolish Burial, we're going to go ahead and send a copy of, let's see, we could send Retainer so we could get access to a card like Awakening later on, or we can go ahead and send a copy of Familiar to go ahead and search out the Genesis if we needed it. You know what? I think I thought of a better play I can do instead. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and send a copy of Retainer to the graveyard. All right, now with Retainer in the graveyard, we're going to go ahead and summon out Zombina in defense mode, and then just wait for our opponent to do something. Now, on their turn, they're going to attack Zombina, it's probably going to get destroyed, and we're going to get to special summon out the Retainer from the graveyard. All right, and because Retainer was special summoned, we get to pay 500 life points, we already did from the last test hand, and with that, we're going to get to search out a copy of, let's see, where's it out? The Vampire's Desire. Vampire Desire is an incredible card for the deck, and you'll see why. All right, now they end their turn, they pass it on to us, we get to draw. All right, with the newly drawn Ryokoki, that's pretty cool. All right, we're gonna go ahead and begin by activating Vampire's Desire here. We're gonna go ahead and target the Vampire Retainer, and we're gonna get to send a vampire monster from our deck to the graveyard with a different level. And with that, we're gonna go ahead and send Familiar to the grave. With Familiar in the graveyard, we're going to activate the effect of Familiar, and we're going to go ahead and special summon it in defense mode by sending our Retainer to the graveyard. We are able to do that because Retainer was special summoned off the effect of Zombina, so you can do that. Now we're going to go ahead and activate the effect of Familiar this time around, and we're going to go ahead and search out for a vampire monster. And with that, we're going to go ahead and search out Vampire Genesis to our hand. Now, the cool thing about this, because this is a vampire monster, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and activate our skill, change the name of Familiar to Vampire Lord, and it's going to get banished to special summon out the Genesis. And with that, we've established our big ass boss monster, which is pretty great. And yeah, that's pretty much Camilla's deck. it probably is one of the more complicated decks just because it's not very linear in the way you want to go ahead and do stuff. Just know that the main thing you want to accomplish is summoning out the Genesis, and because of the skill, being able to get a vampire on the field for Genesis is not that difficult. Alright, let's move on to the next character. Alright then, and wrapping up today's video, we have Tania's Amazoness deck, and I absolutely love this deck. I think this might actually be my second favorite deck to come out of Duelists of Shadows. So essentially, this is a fairly simple beatdown strategy that revolves around Amazoness Queen, and you can see that reflected in both skills. But for the most part, I don't think for the main skill you need Amazoness Queen. While she does help it a lot, you don't particularly need her. So let's actually talk about that. So the main skill of the deck is Welcome to the Jungle, which essentially what it does is that if you took battle damage involving a Amazoness monster you control, that monster that attacked and dealt damage to you loses attack stats equal to the attack and defense of the Amazoness monster it destroyed. That might seem a bit convoluted in the way that it works, but essentially you're supposed to pair up this skill with the face-up Amazoness Queen, which prevents any Amazoness monster being destroyed by battle. While you still take the damage, what you can do with this is essentially, while you control Amazoness Queen, you can attack with one of your weaker Amazoness monsters, deal a bit of damage to yourself, and then have your rest of your Amazoness monsters deal with whatever monster your opponent may have that maybe you weren't able to deal with prior to the attack. And that's a pretty cool way of dealing with that. But the reason I say that you don't necessarily need Amazoness Queen in order to resolve this effect is that you still do have cards like Amazoness Village, where if you attack with, let's say, something like, I don't know, Amazoness Sage, get it destroyed, you take some damage, you're then able to special summon another Amazoness monster from the deck and continue to destroy the opponent's monster, which is a very niche situation, but it can come up. As for the second skill of the deck, we have Order of the Queen. It's another skill. This time around you do need Amazoness Queen, but essentially what this does is that while you control the Amazoness Queen, anytime an Amazoness monster you control destroys an opponent's monster, you're just able to negate any effect they may have. So if they had something like a face-up Mystic Tomato, that card would not resolve its effect because it's destroyed and the effect is just negated. Alright then, now it's time to actually talk about the deck in itself. So starting off, we have Amazoness Queen. I already talked about the effect of it. It's a pretty good boss monster for the strategy, and it's a pretty easy card to bring out. After that, we have just Amazoness monsters galore with Amazoness Chainmaster. This card is able to rip out a card of your opponent's hand, but most of the time I don't think you're going to be using that effect. We have Amazoness Fighter, which is interesting in this deck just because you don't take any battle damage from attacking with her, so it doesn't really pair up well with the Welcome to the Jungle, but it works excellently well with Amazoness Heirloom. We then have Paladin, which gets bigger for each Amazoness monster you control. Sage is able to pop back row if it battles and is still faceable on the field. Amazoness Swordswoman is reverse burn damage. We have Amazoness Tiger, which boosts up all your Amazoness monsters and it pretty much becomes the main target on field. We have Trainee, and this card is kind of cool just because it prevents your opponent from setting up the graveyard, and it does get bigger each time it destroys an opponent's monsters. That's kind of neat. We then have Amazoness Scouts, which is kind of an interesting card because it gives Amazoness monsters a very niche protection effect. First being that while when you tribute this card, neither player can target Amazoness monsters you control with monster effects. Also, they can't be destroyed by card effects, which is really interesting the way that it works because you have both monster targeted protection and then card effect protection. Interesting card, kind of niche, but it does come up. And then finally we have Battle Survivor, and Battle Survivor is a really interesting card in this deck just because the effect is good and it actually goes really well with the effect of Welcome to the Jungle. One of the interesting things you can do is that if you control Battle Survivor plus a Amazoness monster, you can typically do is attack with the Amazoness monster, it's gonna get destroyed, you're gonna take damage, and then during the end phase, the Battle Survivor is gonna recover that Amazoness monster, and then you can destroy that monster, the Amazoness monster battled with the Battle Survivor, which is a very niche interaction, but it's not a bad interaction. Alright, now we're on to the spell and trap cards, and a lot of these are just very oriented towards the Amazoness cards, with Amazoness Fighting Spirit making them all gain 1000 attack during your battle phase. We have Heirloom, which is incredible and it pretty much deals with any monster your opponent may have. We then have Amazoness Spellcaster, which I think would have been much better if it was a quick play. Essentially what it does is it's able to switch the attack and defense stats of any monster your opponent may have, essentially making it to where you have an easier time dealing with an opponent's monster. We then have Amazoness Village, which is a great field spell for the deck, boosting up all Amazoness monsters by 200 attack stats. Also, If an Amazona's monster you control is destroyed, you can special summon another one with a equal and or less level of the monster that was destroyed, which is really good. And finally, for the spell cards, we have Rhoda, which is able to search out most of the deck. All right, onto the trap cards. We have Amazona's Archers. Card is insane. It's so good. Essentially what it does is that if you activate this during the battle phase, all monsters your opponent have lose 500 attack, and that is really rough. Not only that, but every monster your opponent has to attack, and this is one of the ways that you're gonna steal games randomly, just because you have so many ways that you boost up your Amazona's monsters, and then reducing your opponent's monsters by 500 is a sizable amount, and forcing them to attack can just pretty much out their entire field, which is insanely powerful. Then we have Amazona's Wolf Spirit. This card pretty much just revives the Amazona's monster from the graveyard, which is always fantastic. Amazona's Dramatic Rescue is an interesting card in the deck. Essentially, you're able to swap out an Amazona's monster on your field with another card in your hand, and that's not a bad effect, just because with this activation you can cheat out a card like Amazona's Queen onto the field, which is one of the easier ways to bring her out. It's a niche card, but it does come up as well. Half Counter is one of the only generic cards in the deck alongside Rhoda, and essentially what this does is that when a monster you control is being attacked, you're able to make that monster you control gain attack to the monster your opponent has. And this card can randomly just win you duels also, so that's incredible, and it works with the Battle Survivor as well, so that's awesome to know. And finally, we have Queen's Pawn, and this is more of a win more card, but still not a bad card whatsoever. Essentially, if an Amazona's monster you control destroys an opponent's monster, you're able to bring out another one from the deck that's level 4 or lower. And with this kind of swarming potential, this deck can get really scary very fast. Alright, as I said, deck is fairly simple, fairly straightforward. It's just beatdown, but it's so damn fun to play. Now, let's do some test hands. Okay, so here we have Tania. Let's go ahead and put this to the top of the deck, and let's go ahead and establish one of our skills. We'll go to and activate the Welcome to the Jungle skill. Okay, so right here, what I want to do is not much, honestly. This deck right here is a going second strategy, if you couldn't guess, just because you want to be very proactive with this strategy. So what I'm thinking of doing here instead is we're just going to go ahead and begin by summoning out our Amazona's Paladin. And with the summon of Amazona's Paladin, this pretty much gives us the biggest monster we can have on our field. You could always just summon out the Amazona's Swordswoman as well, but if your opponent just summons out a slightly bigger monster, they will have no trouble getting over her. You kind of want to utilize the Swordswoman for later on when they have a bigger monster to go ahead and kind of just take a game out of nowhere. So that's why I didn't summon her out. But with this gives us some level of survivability, just because either opponent's gonna have to crash with another monster of a similar stat line, or they will have to go ahead and open up one of their bigger monsters in order to out it immediately. Let's say we're at a standstill with our opponent. We get to draw for turn. We draw into Chain Master. That's not that great of a draw, but it's okay. What I would do in this situation is I would go ahead and then move on to summoning out Amazona's Sage, and if we wanted to, we could try and crash Sage into whatever monster our opponent may have. We activate the effect of Welcome to the Jungle. It loses the attack stat of Sage, and then the Paladin is able to get over it. Or we could always activate the effect of Amazona's Spellcaster, targeting the opponent's monster and switching its stat lines in order to make the Sage be able to get rid of the monster. But yeah, pretty much just a standard beatdown hand. Let's move on. Let's try another one. Wow, okay, so this is an interesting hand. So let's go and begin by putting the Fighting Spirit to the top of the deck, and let's go ahead and put up our skill. So what I would do in this situation is I would begin by activating the Amazona's Village, and we would summon out the Amazona's Trainee. With the Amazona's Village on the field, this would bring her attack stat to 1700 attack points, but what we can also do in addition to that is we could activate the effect of Amazona's Heirloom, equipping it onto her. There we go. So she's equipped with this card. This pretty much enables her to get rid of any opponent's monster and then just continuously keep getting more and more attack for each monster it gets rid of. But additionally, if you wanted to go ahead and pretty much ensure that she's going to survive any battle she gets into, you can also set the half counter. And with this board right here, it is extremely annoying to out this trainee, and even if they do out the trainee, you can activate the effect of Village to bring out another Amazona's monster. So this hand is pretty freaking awesome, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, let's try out one more. Okay, so this is a very interesting hand. Okay, so what you could do here is, let's see. So we would begin with the summon of Paladin in this situation, and we would also set the Queen's Pawn as well. Now, just like last time, this is going to bring up our Paladin up to 1800 attack points, and we kind of just have to chill on that for now. When we pass it on to our opponent, let's say they can't out the Paladin, so we kind of just are at a standstill. We get to draw for turn, and that would have been very nice to see opening hand. But if we're playing in an ideal scenario, we would then get to normal summon out the Amazoness Tiger. Amazoness Tiger would go ahead and gain 800 attack points, putting it up to 1900. And this would also actually put up the Amazoness Paladin to 1900 as well. And with this scenario right here, we're actually kind of cooking, because we could go ahead and activate the heirloom, equipping it onto the let's say the Amazoness Tiger, because your opponent is forced to attack into this card. Okay, now let's say we enter battle phase and we get to attack. It doesn't really matter which one we attack with, so let's just say Tiger. We attack with Tiger, and then we get to get rid of any opponent's monster they had. Because of the heirloom, it's going to guarantee it, and we activate Queen's Pawn to then go ahead and summon out another Amazoness monster from the deck. In this scenario, you could summon out something like a trainee if they have another weak monster, in order to go ahead and ensure that you can just overwhelm your opponent by a lot. Or you could summon out something like a sage in order to deal with your opponent's back row if they had any. Another option you could bring out is the Amazoness Scouts, which would give your Amazoness cards on the field protection. But I am a bit of a greedy boy, so we're gonna go ahead and summon out the Amazoness Sage to the field. Because we have another Amazoness monster on the field, this is gonna go ahead and make the Paladin gain another 100 attack points, bringing her up to 2000. And the Amazoness Tiger is gonna gain another 400 attack points, bringing him up to 2300. And yeah, with one whole turn, we kind of just turn this whole duel around, and we are kind of just cooking. Alright guys, and with that, this concludes today's video. If you guys have any question regarding any of the character decks we covered in today's video, then let me know in the comment section below. Also, do stay tuned, because in the next few days, part 2 is going to be releasing very soon, with the remaining characters for this set. Also, if you're a big fan of speed duels and would like to check out some of my other content, then consider sticking around, because I have tons and tons of different speed duel content, whether it be my speed duel progression series, my custom speed duel sets, and or just any of my other speed duel stuff. But yeah, with that being said, thank you so much for sticking by, and have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.